the IRS, which is the very agency he's now being tapped to lead. What happens if the guy in charge of collecting the tax revenue to fund the government doesn't think his job should even exist? Who knows? Then there's Trump's pick to lead the Department of Energy, oil industry CEO Chris Wright, a man who has emphatically declared that there is no climate crisis and who likens efforts to fight climate change to Soviet-style communism. Wright has been similarly dismissive about the potential harm to America's drinking water posed by the chemicals used in fracking. And he has gone to some fairly extreme lengths to make that point, posting videos of himself actually drinking a cocktail of fracking chemicals.
So Joel is mixing a collection of chemicals here. Bleach, you use to clean your swimming pool. We use it to kill bacteria too in our frac fluids. Polyacrylamide in the middle. We use it to reduce friction. And on the right, we have a surfactant, otherwise known as soap. Come on, everybody, let's come on in and let's drink to the world from oil and gas. Cheers! Cheers! Cheers.
That guy, the guy making his employees take a shot of bleach and soap on camera, that's the man Donald Trump wants to put in charge of U.S. energy policy. And then there's Trump's pick to be the next director of national intelligence, former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. Concerned members of Congress and the intelligence communities have been ringing alarms about Gabbard's alleged ties to adversarial governments in Russia and Syria. And this week, the Associated Press is reporting that nearly 100 former senior U.S. diplomats and intelligence and national security officials have urged Senate leaders to schedule closed-door hearings to allow for a full review of the government's files on Gabbard before they consider her nomination. It is not a great sign when you nominate someone to lead America's intelligence agencies and members of those same intelligence agencies say, hey, wait a second, maybe you should read the secret files we have on her before you go and do that. It is not a great sign. Then, of course, there is Trump's choice that has been dominating the headlines, his embattled pick for Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. Hegseth has spent the week facing a swirl of allegations of heavy drinking on the job, financial mismanagement, and sexual misconduct, all allegations he denies. NBC News has reported that as many as 6 Republican senators don't yet support Hegseth, which is enough to sink his eventual nomination. Today, Trump himself finally and publicly came to Hegseth's defense in an interview with NBC News' Kristen Welker.
It looks like Peter's doing well now. I mean, people were a little bit concerned. He's a young guy with a tremendous track record, actually. He went to Princeton and went to Harvard. He was a good student at both, but he loves the military, and I think people are starting to see it. So we'll be working on his nomination along with a lot of others.
Since you bring him up, do you still have confidence in Pete Hegseth?
Yes, I do. I really do. He's a very smart guy. I've known him through Fox, but I've known him for a long time. And he's basically a military guy. I mean, every time I talk to him, all he wants to talk about is the military. He's a military guy.
Have you gotten assurances from senators that he's going to be confirmed? Do you think he can make it?
No. I think he will, yeah. I've had a lot of senators call me up saying he's fantastic.
You don't drink yourself.
No.
You've talked about how devastating drinking can be.
No.
How concerned are you that the person who you picked for this top job at the Defense Department, at least according to those who've worked with him, has struggled with drinking?
But I've spoken to people that know him very well, and they say he does not have a drinking problem.
Public display of support. Behind the scenes, Trump is reportedly not doing much to help Hegseth along. According to ABC News, Trump himself has not been working the phones for Hegseth, as he did for Matt Gaetz, his original pick for Attorney General, who withdrew his name from consideration amid sexual assault allegations. And according to the Washington Post, Hegseth has been told not to expect Trump to apply pressure to Republican senators to get him over the finish line, according to people familiar with the discussions. Trump has apparently learned the lesson from the Matt Gaetz debacle, and he is not ready to stick his neck out for another controversial nominee. But reporting tonight suggests that the people around Trump see an upside to all of this. According to a new story from Mark Caputo at The Bulwark, aides to Trump believe that if Hegseth is drawing fire from critics, there will be less attention and heat on Trump's other controversial nominees, like Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Hegseth is a heat shield, said a senior Trump advisor. Pete can take the heat, and that's better for everyone else. Joining me now are Eugene Daniels, Politico Playbook co-author and White House correspondent for Politico, and McKay Coppins, staff writer at The Atlantic. Guys, it's great to have you on this Friday night. Eugene, let me just first start with sort of how this reporting we're getting tonight, Trump's comments, which, are getting some of their first airing from his interview with Kristen Welker on Meet the Press, how that all squares with what you're hearing inside Washington on the Hill about Pete Hegseth's support and how far along his nomination or potential nomination may move.
Yeah, it seems, this changes every single day and sometimes multiple times a day. At this point, the aides of around President Trump feel better about it, but the same senators who have concerns and are worried about both the allegations and the different reports that we've seen, most of them are still in the exact same place, right? You heard from Joni Ernst, the senator from Iowa, who has railed against the DOD and the Pentagon and sexual assault within that organization over and over again. She tweeted today that she was looking forward to continuing to talk with Pete Hegseth, not really a ringing endorsement and saying that, all of these things needed an airing. And so it tells you that on the Hill, things seem to kind of still be in the exact same place, which is not where Pete Hegseth wants it to be. But President Trump and his allies are starting to feel better about it. That is a little bit of cognitive dissonance, but that is kind of where things stand as we sit here on Friday. I will say, as you just said, the idea that President Trump was calling around for Matt Gaetz was something we thought would happen every time one of these folks were in danger. So it does say something that he hasn't, but now you see this interview with Kristen that they're kind of trying to change a little bit of that, at least publicly.
Yeah, I feel like it's what you might call twisting in the wind a little bit. It's like Donald Trump is okay, McKay, if Pete Hegseth wants to keep going back to Joni Ernst and knocking on her door and saying, please. And Joni Ernst may keep saying no, but Donald Trump's not going to do anything about that. I mean, there's a sort of Trump loyalty test, and then there's whether the Senate's actually going to vote on this confirmation. So, this is what Hegseth tweeted, I think, earlier this evening. I just had another substantive conversation with Senator Ernst. I appreciate her sincere commitment to defense policy, and I look forward to meeting with her again next week. I mean, McKay, you know well the sort of the DNA of these Republican senators who effectively know better and know that some of these nominees aren't qualified. If Donald Trump isn't bothering to pressure them, do you think they take the high road?
Well, it gives them a huge out, right? I mean, a lot of what's going on with these more extreme nominees is that it almost seems like Trump is daring Republicans in the Senate to stop him, right? He's kind of testing just how much are they going to let me get away with. Part of the reason I would imagine that he's not applying as much pressure with Hegseth is because he doesn't want to burn too much political capital or demonstrate vulnerability or weakness. What this is going to come down to, though, is those Republican senators you're talking about, and especially John Thune, the Republican Senate leader. I got a text a couple weeks ago from a veteran Republican staffer on the Hill, and I asked him about Thune, and he said, look, John Thune, I have a lot of admiration for him. I've heard him talk about the dangers of Trump, but man, I think he's going to fold immediately early on. That was the quote that I heard from him. Now, that was a couple of weeks ago. We've seen some vulnerability with the Matt Gaetz pick in Trump's kind of muscle on the Hill. But I do think this is just going to come down to whether Republicans on the Senate are willing to exert any strength and kind of flex their muscle in terms of the advise and consent constitutional responsibility they have. If Trump isn't on the phone, like really twisting their arms, I think that with at least a couple of these, we'll see some Republicans step up. But we'll have to see.
Yeah, there's always it seems like they'll probably do the right thing maybe, right. But who knows?
I'm not going to make a bold prediction about
right.
that.
I get that. I'm hearing that, McKay. And I understand. I sympathize, right? Like, all signs would point to, hey, here's an opportunity for you to do the right thing and not, confirm someone who is a swirl in controversy and ask Donald Trump to pick someone else. Then there's the reality of, who Donald Trump is and the pull he has on the party, Eugene. Do you think the fact fact that Trump is effectively a lame duck on day one of his presidency. He cannot and will not, will he run again remains to be seen, but constitutionally he cannot run. And there is some power for Republicans who are not in the presidency but in other elected office to act as a check on him. Do you think that that is a reality that they're even clocking at this stage of the game?
I think there are some folks that are thinking that way, right? But I think mostly we all have learned a lot of lessons since, 2015 when Donald Trump jumped into the political fray. And the top lesson should be that his hold on the Republican Party is unlike anything we've ever seen. And every time that folks have felt like, Susan Collins or some of these other Republican senators are going to stand up to Donald Trump, they have folded over and over and over again. And whether you see that as them being loyal to their party, or more importantly, I think a lot of people see it as them being loyal to one man, it's happened over and over again. So yes, he's not allowed to run again for the presidency according to our Constitution. But that I don't think that means that his hold over the party and getting them to do exactly what he wants them to do is going to stop. That's going to continue for as long as he's president, and as long as he wants to be and acts like the leader of the Republican Party. There's something within the Republican Party where the other folks who could be leaders refuse to do so, can't do so, won't do so, and rise to that challenge. And I think a lot of that has to do with how much of a figure Donald Trump is for the Republican Party and the folks that vote for him. And the MAGA movement, it seems, is actually real. So that tells us that these Republicans will get some chances, right? We're seeing it. We saw it with Matt Gaetz, where they called Donald Trump and said, hey, this is a no-go. We're not really seeing that so much now, but they will have time after time after time over the next 4 years to stand up to Donald Trump if that's what they choose to do. It's just hard to see. I think a lot of people have gotten their hopes up over the years and been let down over and over and over again.
Yeah, then there's also, there's a reality of, for example, the script leading into this block. There are so many unqualified, controversial nominees. The focus is immediately distracted. I will read a quote from Mark Caputo's piece, McKay. An advisor to a Senate Republican put it bluntly: reporters are like flies at a picnic. If you put some food away from the picnic table, the flies will swarm that and leave everyone else alone to eat at the barbecue. I guess eat at the barbecue is the metaphor we're using for confirming Pete Hegseth. I don't know. Or something like that. I feel like there's almost a certain bet that Trump has flooded the zone so much that they're going to be able to get the vast majority of these folks through.
Well, it's been this kind of game of misdirection that Trump has been playing from the beginning, right? Matt Gaetz distracted from the scrutiny that Hegseth should have been getting. Hegseth is now probably distracting from the scrutiny that Kash Patel and RFK Jr. and a number of the other people that you talked about in that at the top of the hour there should be getting. The reality is that the press only has so many column inches, so many minutes in their broadcast, so many people in their newsrooms to cover all of these nominees. And the reality is, like, we just can't cover all of them and give them all the investigative scrutiny that they deserve. And we've never really had a president who's nominated such a large slate of controversial nominees at once. And I think that is one of Trump's talents. He's used this talent in other ways. The way that he deploys a variety of controversial, provocative rhetoric every single day. Reporters can't focus on any one thing for too long. But this, again, I'm sorry to come back to it, but this is where